Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum at Cadence Independent Media. This week we're going to do a little bit of a shorter and super focused episode on something that I think doesn't get enough attention, which is the reso side of your toms. And we're going to go through a bunch of intervals, kind of like we did with the snare side head a few weeks ago, and just kind of see what happens. A few weeks ago, we did concert toms with no resonant head on them at all. And we also did a sort of run through of how the different levels of tension on the snare side head affect the way the snare behaves. And I feel like the bottom of toms get the least amount of attention on the drum set in terms of tuning and what different tunings, pitches, intervals, and everything do to the sound of the drum. So we decided the most run-of-the-mill thing we could do is take a suspension-mounted 12-inch maple tom and set the batter head to a single tension and leave it alone, and we're going to just take the bottom head through kind of quickly a lot of different tensions from basically barely on there all the way up to super tight and leave this head alone. What we want to look for here when we're listening is the overall change in sustain, the possibility of pitch bend in the sound, which you may have experienced or at least heard about before, and finally, the perceived change in overall pitch of the drum itself. Keeping in mind that we're not changing the batter head, and a lot of the time I think that people think of the batter head as the pitch and the reso side as like the sustain or the tone control, which isn't entirely wrong, but it does actually change the pitch that you hear and that the audience hears. So first off, what we're doing is setting this to the following pitch. Now the overtones there, I feel like are a little squirrely because the bottom head is barely on. It's just finger tight, so it's throwing some kind of funny noise around inside the drum. But hopefully that pitch, the fundamental pitch, is clear enough. Based on requests that people have had, stick around till the end of the video where we will stack up all of these sounds right in a row so you can hear the sort of crescendo through the different pitches. So first off, we're going to do just finger tight on the bottom head, and then we're going to go an eighth of a turn on each of them. The reason we're doing such a small interval is because these are die-cast hoops, so the hoop itself is raising the whole head a little bit more dramatically when you turn each screw because of how stiff the hoop is compared to a thinner triple flange or even like an S hoop or sort of middle ground things like that. When I do these eighths of a turn, I am going to go around and listen and make sure that everything is at the same pitch because there is going to be room for slip at these lower tunings. So it's not just an eighth of a turn and that's it. I'm going to do an eighth of a turn and then make sure and even them out just a little bit. Ordinarily, when I'm evening out pitches, I find the highest one and move up to that one because lowering pitch, you run into friction problems against the edge of the drum and stuff like that. At this point, the bottom head is just about tabletop tight. It's real tight. It's still resonating, but it's real tight. And I really saw a lot of different changes in the sound where I'm sitting here. The batter head is tuned fairly soft. It's not real tight. I would say like low medium. And we sort of, just because we weren't going for certain intervals, we jumped right over the part where they would be identical intervals. Partly for me because in my experience, I don't see the exact same pitch of both of the heads as actually being the most resonant sound of the drum, because they are going to be making the same pitch and neither of them is promoting the other one to continue making the pitch that it's making. And that's just a little bit of like a physics sort of conundrum, but it's definitely real. And it's also why like when I do jazz tunings and bop stuff, I'll tune the batter head tighter for articulation, but I won't then pitch the reso side past it. I'll actually pitch it below. And it's basically the same thing as if you took your normal tuning where your bottom would be tighter and just flip the drum over. You end up with the same pitch, which is sort of confusing. It doesn't make that much sense that you could be hitting a head that's tuned to a different pitch than the one you were just hitting and have the same note come out of it. But that goes to show you the interaction between the heads generating the sound that you're hearing and not just one or the other. Because we're using a 2-ply clear batter and a 1-ply clear reso, there's plenty of attack on this. And if we were to pitch up the batter head a little bit and do this same sort of routine, the entire spectrum would have a little more sustain and a little less attack. But I feel like for these types of heads, this was kind of the right place to start with the batter head. And I think that it's worth noting, doubly so with die-cast hoops, really with any hoop at all, if you're going to do pitch experimentation, rather than aiming for a certain pitch, think in terms of the head being in tune and make your changes very, very small. Very just like a small enough turn that it feels insignificant. Because just now, I think we probably crossed an octave from where we started with finger tight to where we ended up in terms of where the reso side was. And aiming for certain intervals rather than using your ear to get the sound that you want, it can get you in the ballpark, but you still have to decide if that's the sound you want. You know, if somebody says, tune them the same, or a half step above and no more, or a fourth above, like, you know, Manu, there's people that do crazy intervals with their toms because it's the sound that they like. They don't do it because somebody said that's how you tune your rack tom. You know, they learned that for themselves and influences the way that they play, you know. And anytime you've ever played your buddy's kit that plays a totally different style than you notice like, oh man, I can't work with this floor tom, or this bass drum feels crazy, or even just the spring tension on their pedal makes it impossible for you to use it, you know. But something as simple as how much tone do I want out of this drum, and then how do I get that? Tiny intervals. Just like if you were adjusting spring tension, try tiny intervals, not all the way loose or all the way tight. Think little things and you'll find your spot, and maybe you'll find a bunch of spots like we did here today. And if this is useful to you, if you like it, please comment, subscribe, hit that like button. And if you do something crazy with your toms, let us know. I'm always curious to see what other people are doing. These are much larger extremes than I normally use. I kind of stay in a narrow range for myself. But yeah, let us know and I hope you enjoy.